Do you work in film and television and are looking for ways to scale your impact? Or it might be that you are looking for ways to get into the industry in the first place and you don't know where to start. I am so happy to be with you today and to have a very special guest to kick off the season of Arts Dynamics Talks for 24-25, Mr. Tyler M. Reid, who is an expert, a creative producer, and who has such a vast experience in all things film production, writing, distribution. I want to know more, Tyler, also about the YouTube that I read about you, that you managed to have tens of millions of views on YouTube and global distribution. So the whole chain of the business side and the marketing side, we're going to talk about that and much more. So Tyler, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm very happy to be here. It's really nice to be on this fantastic channel.
Thank you so much. Yeah, we're all about monetization and helping creators monetize their creativity and to use technology to do so. So we will obviously talk a lot about money today and monetization and technology. But first and foremost, I'd love for the audience to learn a little bit more about you and your background and what made you go into film and television in the first place.
Wow. Well, it's been since I was a little kid that I can recall. I've always loved movies, and my father was a huge consumer of movies and, showed us lots of films when we were young. And I remember the first time it really stuck with me that what you see is something that's created by people. And that was when he did a little trick with his handheld old VCR camcorder and, put me up against a wall and then pushed record and then paused it and said, okay, Tyler, move away. I'm going to put this teddy bear here, and then pushed record. And then when you played it back, of course, what you see is I'm sitting there and then boop, all of a sudden I'm a teddy bear. In essence, just kind of in a way, stop motion, live action stop motion. And that blew my mind. I realized, oh gosh, there's so much you can do just by, just pushing a button on the camera and kind of what creates all of this stuff. And then from that point on, I was enamored. And everything I've done, from that moment until today has all been film media kind of related. I went in I think they offered one or two classes in my high school, doing, I think it was like live news, morning show, and I think some kind of media class. I took those. Undergraduate, my degree is in film media broadcasting, and then my master's, pursued my master's in filmmaking. So, and then from that point on, just, every job I had related to film or media in some capacity.
And what do you do today for those that wonder?
Okay, yeah.
You've had many different roles, and I know.
Oh my gosh, I think I've had a role in kind of every area you could be in, from commercials, music videos, films, documentary, reality TV. So and working for companies, working for myself. So I've kind of been in every area, live events even. So today though, I'm a freelance producer for a virtual production company called VP Nordic, which is based in Sweden, that provides virtual production solutions to films and TV shows, and also provides sort of virtual production setup installation solutions to studios, small companies, educational centers like universities and things like that. And then at the same time, I still work as a freelance producer, usually on the development side. So I try to help get shows or films, things like that developed, and accidentally have become, a content creator educator. So that's something I've become very passionate about in the last year, and I put a lot of focus and energy into as well.
Yeah, and what stands out to me, and the reason why I'm so happy to have you on today, is I'm a big believer in supporting people who are doing great things for other people. And what I've noticed about you is that you're so generous with your expertise, and you're sharing hands-on strategic advice and tactical advice for filmmakers and people working in the ecosystem that is this industry. And I notice how people respond, and you also do these threads where people can connect. And I really just want to give you credit for that, and for people who are now watching or listening to this, that go check out your content and what you are sharing, because there's a lot of golden nuggets in there, and people are, I can tell they are connecting, and they, as a result, I'm sure business opportunities open up. And you're such a giver. So if there's any way that we here today can just shine a light on you and your work, I couldn't be happier. So again, thank you so much for being on.
Yeah, and thank you. And I appreciate you shining that light. And I love sharing all that information and all that knowledge, because like I said, big part of how I got here today was through pursuing a lot of it through education.
Yeah.
And so I know how important it is to find access to information and knowledge. And it's, filmmaking and any kind of medium is so vast. So, I mean, I share something very specific, but there's so much out there. And so it's just nice to be able to share something that I think will be helpful. And then there's only a small part of that. And then hopefully they find someone else who will give them a great amount of information and wisdom, and they can just kind of aggregate all that together, in their careers. And hopefully it'd be very useful for them.
Totally, totally. And I bet since you've been doing this for a while, as you mentioned, you surely must have seen a lot of changes happening. And we are talking about technology and all the disruption that's happening. I would just love to have your take on that, from where you started and where we are now, and also, what's around the corner. But yeah, what has happened during your years?
Yeah, well, I mean, I remember how quickly it kind of changes, or how easily things are accessible, and then also kind of how scary it can be too. So we'll kind of go through that. But I remember I got my own personal sort of video camera, sort of a high 8 digital handy cam kind of thing in high school, and I got my own piece of editing software. And these are like 2 Christmas presents, from one year, and then the next Christmas present another year, because the camera was like $800, and the software was like $200, and you had to buy tapes and stuff. That's about $1,000. But that gives me just 2 things. I can film and I can edit, but I can't distribute. Also, it's really poor quality audio. And so there's a lot of things in there that aren't there. But now with like this, which costs the same amount of money, I can do everything. And that has been the amazing thing with technology for the last, 100 years, of course, that it gives you better tools to create what you're trying to create, and also gives you better access to people and a better distribution platform. And sort of in a way, technology has been like amazing. Everyone's loved it up until about, I would say, 2 years ago. And that was the introduction of AI. And those also are amazing tools that people love. But at the same time, there are tools that a lot of people are very scared of, which I can see the argument on both sides. So that's something that I think for the first time I've ever seen, that technology is now, tools that are very accessible are actually being really pushed back against. I mean, it kind of happened when Red released their digital cinema camera 15 years ago or whatever it was at this point. And, it's like, there's a lot of people saying like, well, celluloid is the way to go when you're making a film. But it opened up a lot of access for a lot of filmmakers to shoot high quality films. But that wasn't the same thing as kind of what's happening now, I'd say, with AI. So that's been interesting to see. I actually, when I saw these AI tools in their first release, I never thought anyone would think they were negative. And so this is just to say, I get where they're coming from. I think that there's a lot of great tools to help you create what you want to create. But also I can see that there's the fear that it's like, well, it's going to take away my work or my jobs, or even replicate my work and job. What about copyright has been a big issue, of course, recently. I kind of went all around there I don't think I answered anything very specific. So if you have something to you want to sort of ask specifically about what I just said there, let me know. But that was a very broad explanation of technology I've seen the last few years that have sort of really changed the industry.
Yeah, we will definitely go deeper into this, and for people who are now listening, just so you know, we really want to get in touch with you. We want to understand, what are your pain points? What are you struggling with? What don't you understand? Or what do you see and notice that scares you or brings you hope? And even this conversation today, we're going to touch upon more broadly or sort of more general topics, but we really do also want to make sure that you feel that it resonates with where you're at right now in your journey. And who knows, we might even be able to get a little bit tactical with tools and stuff. We'll see where this conversation leads. But even after this conversation, if any questions arises or you don't understand some words that we're using, just let us know. Because I know you are the same here, Tyler, that it's all about us figuring things out together. No one knows it all. It moves super fast. You said the past 2 years, and we can see now, I just attended an XR hackathon, a global hackathon organized by Meta in partnership with different cities in here in Stockholm. It was with Epicenter Stockholm, Vinnova was there. and other partners, Logitech, among others. And we had hackers both from Sweden and abroad who came to basically use the latest in extended reality, augmented reality, VR, to create and to come together. So there were a lot of people from our industry, well, more and more people from our industry, several from the Arts Dynamics community that connected with tech people and coders. And we had a lot of these conversations with this new technology and AI, the role of AI for storytelling and identity as an artist. So I guess my question to you then is, you said this happened 2 years ago, that you could see this big shift, and you also working in virtual production. How do you use this in your own work? And are there any particular platforms that you can recommend for if people are interested, or how do you go about it as a professional yourself with this?
Yeah, that's a good question. In terms of virtual production, I mean, still a lot of, first off, I guess it's a quick explanation of virtual production in case anyone doesn't know what that is. It's actually a broad term that covers a lot of area, but a lot of times now when people speak of virtual production, they are referring to sort of usually LED or LED walls that then have something on it, that when you film an actor in front of it, so you have these assets that are being filmed in camera. So I kind of the first, I would say, mainstream way that people saw it was the behind the scenes, like let's say the show The Mandalorian, and had this big curved wall, and then had all these LED screens. And in essence, what they did is they took all these environments that would normally be done in post-production and then brought it into production. So it could actually be on a screen instead of a green screen, and which is then something that's replaced later, but on a screen, so it can be filmed in camera. So another name for it is in-camera visual effects. In essence, you're bringing visual effects into the camera. So it gives the director, cinematographer, the actors, all the other departments something to actually interact with as opposed to a green screen. So that's a very sort of quick explanation of virtual production as it kind of is talked about today. But so for us in AI tools, you still need artists to create a lot of those assets. A main tool that's used is called Unreal Engine. A lot of people know it because of Fortnite, but that creates a lot of the 3D worlds and environments that are then brought into into virtual production. I mean, there are other tools too, like Blender and other 3D creative tools and softwares. So all those things are used to create these worlds in virtual production. AI tools aren't really creating the assets yet that are needed. They could help with making something look a little better or flow a little bit better together, but they're not actually creating the specific worlds, like and I like what prompting is, like people know what that is. You type in, I need give me a Grand Canyon type of landscape, and then it sort of populates it for you. So those tools at the moment don't really exist for virtual production. I'm sure they will come. So a lot of the AI tools are really supplemental tools. They're not really, I wouldn't call them creation tools. They're really just to help the artists and to help them maybe create something a little faster or a little smoother, or to handle the metadata in a better way that needs to be used later on. So those kind of the creations or the artistic tools aren't really that big or well used yet. And I don't even know if there's any at the moment that are used in such a high capacity, because a lot of times, a lot of the great AI we see is someone that's really, really, really working hard to really kind of prompt and work with those different AI tools to get what they want. And at the moment, it's still faster for an artist just to use their own skill sets and and the tools they already use to create things they need for visual effects or for virtual production.
Yeah, I mean, AI and the development, what was happening now is happening at a rapid pace as well, because I've been told, that, but AI so far is just us, it's us humans, it's what we put into AI. But AI is becoming so complex and so smart that eventually the experts, the top experts in the world, are saying that we will hit singularity. We will hit a point where actually AI becomes sentient, and we already does things without our control. And I know many in our industry, in the cultural and creative industries, their organizations are also telling them now, don't upload your artwork, don't upload your photographies, because obviously when you do that and you upload that into ChatGPT, for instance, or one of these platforms, from a royalty and copyright perspective, that will be a problem because they train on our data that we upload. In the film industry, how do you talk about these things there, using all these AI tools, but you're also then giving AI your best thinking and best IP? Are there any conversations about that?
Well, yeah, it's difficult. One, because filmmaking is a film involves a lot. It involves, you have a screenwriter who's maybe that's it. Maybe just a writer or a storyteller, the writer. And then you have various creatives, someone creating visual effects, someone who's an editor, the cinematographer, etc. So there's all kinds of different AI tools that can be used for filmmaking. But maybe one of them is just used to help with screenwriters, or one of them is just used to help create some visuals or things like that. So actually, what was the question? Where are we going with that?
Well,
yeah, or how are we seeing them being used? Is that kind of where
yeah, it's just
that
that in other industries, what we see is that creators are being advised against putting their work into AI because AI is being trained on and will steal their work, basically. So I'm just wondering, from a person do you see?
Yeah. That's very difficult. That's a very, very difficult line, because you may want to upload a screenplay to get maybe an analysis back. There's some AI tools that help analyze your screenplay, or help look at it from like a script breakdown point of view, or a scheduling point of view. But at the same time, it's being trained on your screenplay. Now, is that to say that it's hard? I mean, with photography or with things like that, you have a very specific style. Or if you're an illustrator and a very specific type of artist, you have a very specific style. So then it's easy to see when AI creates an image, like, wait, that looks like something I would create. That looks like that comes from sort of my fingerprint. But a screenplay is a little harder. A film is much harder, because there's a lot of different creative inputs that go into it. So, when you get if AI pumped a film out, it would be hard to say, that looks like it copied, this specific style. In essence, it would copy a sort of a genre style, but a style of a specific person would be very difficult to say that it's doing that. So it's hard to know if it's from like photographers, again, art and painters and illustrators and things like that. I get the idea of don't upload, because you're afraid that is going to be obviously fed into this giant machine that is, having to consume this material in order to create it. But for screenwriters and filmmakers, I don't think that's a big worry, because it's going to be hard for it to pump out a very specific type of style that you make, unless you train it very specifically that way. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. And I had a conversation the other day with an actor, and he mentioned how a world-renowned brand, I will not mention it here, they had asked him to come in for a day. They would only pay him for that day, for them to scan his voice, his body, everything, his whole expression as an actor. And they only wanted to pay him for that day. And then also they've got the rights on all universes everywhere in all solar systems and so forth. And he was like, what do I make of this? They can make digital twins and they can just, scan you and then use that forever and ever. But as an actor, or there are other roles obviously involved in film production, it's like an entire ecosystem. I'm just curious, is that something that you see from your end with what you're working with? And does it relate not only to actors? Do you also, as a production company, and, do you also notice different ways now of working with these, productions that we're talking about?
No, I wouldn't say so. A lot of the things that I find most interesting and what I work with is on the indie film side. And
Mm-hmm.
so, and a lot of that is, it's creators just grinding to kind of get their visions to come to life. And most of the time, if I see them using AI tools, they will use it to help maybe create a pitch deck
Mm-hmm.
or to help create a business plan. Or then if it's something going to be visual, they use it maybe to help them create a teaser trailer for their film that they will actually shoot or film, but they just don't have maybe the time, money, resources, etc., to have a nice teaser trailer to use in their pitch. So a lot of times when I'm seeing AI in filmmaking, it's usually to just like a supplemental piece, and a lot of times it's a supplemental piece on the development end, and they're not using it aggressively on the production end. Because I think a lot of filmmakers still really want to, they are creatives and they want to create, and filmmaking is, getting behind the camera and interacting with actors, even even feeling like you're on a set, on a location, even if you're not, like, like virtual production. You build a little set and you have virtual production, so you feel like you are somewhere. And so filmmaking is a very sort of hands-on creative experience. And so I think a lot of filmmakers still are going to use the traditional methods of making a film and then maybe supplement some of their stuff with AI. At this point, especially because drones are so ubiquitous now with filmmaking, they're so cheap. You always see these like drone footage in even the smallest indie films because you can buy a drone for very, very cheap and use it. But if you're like, I can't be on a mountain, but I would love to have this like drone footage. That's something that AI would use. That I can imagine them using AI for. But I don't think it would be, I really want to create actors, or I want to create a whole scene or things like that with AI. I think it'll just be supplemental pieces for quite some time. But eventually what happens, just like with any technology, all these very, very, very young kids now are right now we're sort of adopted into AI, but they are going to be born into it.
Yeah.
It's like that great line in The Dark Knight Rises. And it's what he says that it's like, Batman was merely adopted the darkness. I was born in it. And that's what's happening. So we right now are adopting these tools. And so that's why we have sort of this, we have this kind of sometimes love and hate relationship with it, because we weren't born into it. But all the generations that is being born now are being born into AI. So by the time they are 15 and 16 and 20 and 25 and well into their careers, AI, it won't even be a question. They won't even be talking. It will just be a tool, so I at some point, it's kind of all that we can do now is hope kind of create some guardrails that help ensure that AI just isn't stealing our material. But eventually, it's going to be smart enough to create its own, and it won't need to kind of steal in a way. I mean, kind of the way that a human thinks. In essence, we are all stealing because everything because all we're doing is collecting everything we've ever watched and read, and then we're putting it together within our own kind of thought process, and then we create something new. AI isn't really creating anything new. It's sort of just taking everything that exists because it's not really thinking. But once it can do that, and it's like, well, I'm actually going to create something new here based on the hundreds of trillions of data I've come across. That will be a different thing. And so all we can do is maybe put some guardrails in place that say, hey, we need to ensure that it's not stealing everything, or ensure that a piece of a film that's made, is at least 70%, real or whatever. Like the different unions in the U.S. that went on strike, SAG and WGA, the Writers Guild and the Screen Actors Guild. A big part of that was also about the usage of AI and what is being created and what has already been created. So I think if we put in some safety nets, at least we can see new creation. So the idea is that someone 25 years from now creating isn't just sitting at their computer and not actually doing anything and just saying, I'm just going to sort of prompt this entire movie and upload it, and then I can be on my merry way. That they actually kind of keep really physically creating something.
Yeah, I would so love to hear from people from our communities based on this conversation too, Are you using AI already? How does that affect your work and the way you do tell stories and the way you produce? Because as you said, now you can do a lot, obviously, using new technology. And I'm just so curious, how does it change also the artistic, the creative process, but also the production side, the monetization side, the marketing side with these new technologies that are coming? Do you remember the first time we saw, was it Will Smith eating spaghetti? Or when people like so many, fingers on their hands, and people said, no, AI will never. But now, if you look at videos, it looks so real. You can't tell the difference. It moves so fast. So, but then based on this, then two things come to mind. Three things come to mind. One, I went to a performance yesterday. It was the wonderful Eric Rosales. He's a performing artist, and he had this wonderful performance about AI identity. So identity, but AI identity. So it was him and an AI robot on stage. And they were talking about the whole performance was about the how we relate to AI, and he had the conversations with AI. He pulled us in as the audience. He asked us questions and prompts, and then they created things on the spot. And he had this conversation with us about the role of AI for storytelling, but also for us as humans. And when we hand everything over to AI, and I'm thinking filmmaking and television, and whether it is commercials or long films or short films or whatever, it's still about us telling our stories through this medium. And what he explored on stage was, where do we draw the line? And even AI said to us in the performance, said that don't give us too much, because when AI starts talking to AI, an assistant at this production company speaks to an AI assistant at that production company, and they tell their own stories, then suddenly there is no room for us. So there was this like balance of, where do we draw the line and how much should we really give to AI? Obviously, we're doing this because it's part of where we're in history. But I think there was something about that I felt was, I'd love to hear more about those kind of conversations and stories. Do you see where I'm getting at? Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Exactly. Yeah. 100%. I mean, yeah, understand. I really like that example. I think it's fun to see and understand how people will interact
Yeah.
and use it, and where they find a balance for themselves. Like that's the thing. A lot of times we talk about these broad terms, like, well, what's the overall balance? But a lot also too, it's a very singular balance. Where do you find the balance for yourself as a
Yeah.
creative? At what point do I say, okay, I've kind of used enough of what I need to use. I'm gonna still, tell my stories. So the AI isn't telling a story for me.
Exactly. And also now you can translate, obviously, in real time. It's like the Babel fish from the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. We can translate immediately, and it can even, change. If you say something in a certain kind of way, it can change it to say it in a different kind of way to make it more adaptable to that kind of audience. And I'm just, again, thinking from a filmmaking or storytelling perspective, what it actually means for our creators today who are creating these amazing experiences that we're watching and seeing. If we're there, and you can now produce, you can write, you can produce, you can release a film or a series, documentary, whatever, which can be broadcast globally in all languages. You can make it bespoke, and you can have gamification, and people can be the main character in them, even with today's technology. I mean, imagine a few years from now. Where do you see we're heading with these things?
Oh, that, I mean, you kind of covered it all. I mean, you can at some point, like you said, I think eventually, AI will kind of create any kind of film and story at some point. I mean, it'll eventually happen. But I think certain tools like distribution and getting your work out to a broader audience, like you said, whatever language you film it in, but then you can use AI tools to create dubbing or subtitling. I mean, I know, again, there are probably people who would be very, very angry that I say that, because there are people whose jobs are to dub films, and there's people whose jobs are to subtitle films. But there's a lot of, but that's the balance of, especially as indie filmmakers, you only have usually have a very small amount of money, but you want to reach the widest audience, and you don't know exactly where your audience is sometimes, or exactly who your audience is, especially when you're first starting out. So you want to reach them as widely as possible. So you may, so from pre-production to production to even post-production, for the most part, you do it, it's humans creating it. And then you're like, okay, but now I need AI's help for distribution. And they could be like, and we'll use again the dubbing and the subtitling. So like I can get it into a lot of different countries. You can start 3-4 different YouTube channels, and then it can be your Spanish speaking YouTube channel, your Mandarin speaking YouTube channel, things like that. And it's the same content, but then now it's going to be dubbed or subtitled or whatever. Sort of, kind of Mr. Beast does that same kind of thing to reach a wide audience. So I can see filmmakers in order to, reach a wider audience, or to, especially even film festival submissions and things like that, you need specific and certain types of subtitles. And so those things can be very expensive, and you say, okay, well, I can use an AI tool to do that for me. I don't know any specific names, but there are tools out there. You can just, I'm sure, Google it and find it. So I can see those kind of tools being used, and I can see a lot of filmmakers saying, well, that's okay. That's okay on the AI end. And of course, there'll be plenty of people who would think that's obviously horrendous as well. But I still think for quite some time, filmmakers aren't going to be using AI tools in a large way to create their stories for them. I think it'll just still be supplemental.
Yeah. For now.
Yeah, of course. It's always for now.
I had
yeah.
Go on.
No, I was just gonna say, yeah. I mean, it's like anything. I mean, the whole, like we were talking about earlier, the digital filming on digital versus celluloid, and that for quite a few years that was a big fight. And most people are like, how could you not shoot on film? And when I finally get money as an indie filmmaker, of course I'm going to shoot on film. I'm tired of shooting on, usually it's like cassette tapes or even just smaller, really bad digital. But now if something is shot on film, it's like, oh, whoa, they actually are shooting on film. So like you said, yeah, for now, I mean, exactly. For now, these are the conversations we're having with AI. 20 years from now, I mean, they're going to be, they're going to be moot.
Yeah, we need to revisit this conversation in the future. I have a feeling.
I'm going to ask AI to find that. I'm like, did you find that conversation I had 20 years ago?
Totally. And also what we're seeing, someone said that, I think I've mentioned this before, even on this podcast, is that, the US election is often a way to tell where we are heading, because each time they have an election in the US, they're always at the forefront of new trends and new technology. And the big thing this year is the use of fake news, fake media, and it's one thing that they use AI and this new technology to create these films, create these stories using the filmmaking and also photography. But it's also what we're seeing is that some of the biggest names are also doing it without telling us that this is fake. So they are releasing full stories. And I know Taylor Swift just came out, I think after the debate yesterday. She said that I'm a cat lady, and they've used this fake AI film to say that I support one candidate. And I feel that I have to come out and tell the truth, that is not the one I'm endorsing. I'm actually endorsing the other candidate. And that to me was interesting, because then as an artist, as a creator, she steps forward, because I think also she feels obviously that for her community, she needs to be, transparent about where she stands. But it's how these films are being used and these mediums. And it's one thing if people do it themselves, or let's say creators listening to this, they create their own things. But when big, influential, powerful gatekeepers do it, no matter where they are, how does it affect us when they do that and we can't tell? That to me is like a philosophical question, but that's where we are at right now.
I mean, that's the scary part. I mean, there's no, I guess there's nothing to add to what you're saying. I mean, it's just that, there's no laws kind of in place to stop those things from happening. And even if there were, because technology moves so quickly, it's so hard to, I mean, in a day, someone can upload 100 fake videos, and it's just, and you do that every single day, and you could, and so it'd be hard to track down every single one of them. And it's like one video pops up here, it's in 20 other places within 24 hours. So yeah, it's scary. It's very scary, because like with any great tool, there will always be people who will use it to someone else's disadvantage.
Yeah, for sure. And I spoke to a cyber intelligence expert the other day, and she shared with me she had created this video. She was doing it as part of an exercise to talk about obviously safety and how to protect ourselves from cyber threats. So she had created her own video as part of that exercise and created the music in an AI just to showcase that. And it was basically, this is not a drill, this is real, this is happening, scenario playing. And it was so real, you couldn't tell it was fake. And also I was in a group on Facebook, a ChatGPT-4 group on Facebook, at least we've got it here in Sweden. And someone uploaded a film, a 20-minute film, and it sounded exactly as if there was something happening, war was coming, and basically our government told people, lay down your weapons, we're not going to be, we're not going to fight this. And it sounded so real, and they were interviewing all these different people, like the prime minister there, and the expert person there, and the military there, and it sounded so real. Again, if we're there now, imagine, as you said, 10 years from now, or even a year from where we're at now.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you can very easily cause mass hysteria and mass panic.
Yeah, for sure.
Very quickly with something fake. Actually, you telling that story made me think of, if I'm not mistaken, it was when Orson Welles' War of the Worlds was aired on radio, and the opening is sort of how the world has fallen apart. And a lot of people panicked and freaked out because they thought, oh, this is a real newscast that's happening right now, and not understanding this is fiction. And that's the key, not understanding it's fiction. And we're in a position now where so much is being created that many people can't tell what is fiction and not.
Yeah.
And that's what's scary. And that's where panic and hysteria and, very dangerous things can happen.
Yeah.
And very dangerous choices can be made when someone viewing something doesn't realize what they're watching is not real. It's fiction.
Yeah. So I guess anyone who's working in your industry, then maybe now is the time to ask yourself, who do I want to be in this? Who am I in this? What kind of stories do I want to tell? How do I want to leverage new technology? If you do, I mean, there are some creators that actually say, no, I'm going to go off grid. That's my whole thing. I'm actually not going to do AI. I'm not going to do that. And I see more and more people go back to more analog ways of creating and producing and even distributing. And I see that there's sort of both sides to that. But listen, we could talk about, I think, forever, but I would love to go into a little bit more tactics as well, if that is okay.
Yeah. Yeah, of course, let's do it.
Questions.
Yeah.
So I have a question, dear Tyler. What would you say are top 3 things that someone should know in order to get into this industry as a DIYer, for instance?
That's a great question. Actually, I like that question a lot. So a lot of what I talk about is the business side of filmmaking, but it's the only reason it's a business and it's successful as one is because some creative piece of work is being made. So depending on what your goal is as a DIY filmmaker, that usually is like everything. A lot of times that means I want to go out and I want to go and make films. I would say don't even think about the business part just yet. Just use that piece of technology you have in front of you, like your phone, and whatever you have access to, and just make something. And it's like 3 steps. Have an idea and write that idea down. The more you can sort of prep and plan, the better. Make that idea, so film it in essence and edit it, and use whatever tools are available to you to make it as wonderful as possible, and distribute it. And a lot of people make things and then they're afraid to get it out there because they're like, it's not that good. It's not going to be that good. It's going to be pretty bad. I think even Roger Ebert wrote a book called something like Your Film Sucks, or something like that, because it will. I mean, it will be bad, and some things will be good and some things will be bad, and that's okay. But it's making it and doing it and getting it out there. There's no. We were sort of having a pre-conversation, and I brought this up, but there's no secret sauce to DIY filmmaking. There's no special way. It's just be prolific. meaning, make it and work it and make it and work it. And for now, you treat it as a hobby until you really feel like you've done a good job at doing the creative. And then the moment you want that hobby to be a career or a business, then you need to think in business terms and think, okay, now how do I make something with money? How do I raise a little bit of money? How do I find my audience? How do I find the right collaborators? Because filmmaking is a collaborative art form, from the business side collaborators to the creative side collaborators. And you don't want just anybody. You want to figure out, okay, who's the right people? How do I market it? So you go from the creative side to the business side, especially if you're sort of just an indie filmmaker. A lot of indie filmmakers on the really, really low indie side so operate as their own kind of production company and things like that. So they have to be very well business versed. And then obviously, a lot of times, of course, they start on the creative side of it. But you need to be well business versed in the business of filmmaking. So starting out, though, I would just focus on trying to be a creator and getting stuff out there and getting used to being judged, even though it always hurts. No matter, sometimes I write things even on LinkedIn and I'll kind of get some pushback or people like that, and I'm like, oh, that kind of hurt, even though there could be 50 comments of approval and praise. And there's that one comment of just like, this was terrible. I'm like, oh, it always hurts. But just do the best you can to get used to it. But just create and, just create. And no, it's going to take a lot of creating. There's no filmmaker that has become an overnight success. They have created, even if maybe their first or second feature film launched their career into something great, they spent, they probably made 25 short films and they struggled along the way. So just create a lot.
Okay.
And then begin growing audience and things like that.
Yeah. So question number 2 is top 3 income streams then. I mean, where do you find the money? Where do you find the funding today in 20?
Okay, so you mean sort of like development funding, but income would then be like the revenue, right?
Yeah,
okay,
let's
so
going in or revenue.
to money, yeah. Well, I would take money to get started, like to make your film. I mean, there's a lot of different ways. People like, it's not uncommon to be like, okay, I'm going to start making my first indie film and I'm looking for investors. I'm like, well, one, that's not going to work. I see that on LinkedIn all the time. People are like, all right, I've got this film and the script and I've got a budget and I'm looking for investors. I'm like, well, that's not how investors don't even invest in startups that way. So I've got this great idea and I've got a pitch deck. I need some investors. I'm like, that's not how that works. So don't look for investors first. That should be the last thing you do, because the moment you bring on an investor, you're committing to they're gonna want you to sign something. So you're committing to a legal document. And you have to treat their money with sort of the utmost respect. So don't look for investors yet. There's all kinds of other ways to find money. I mean, crowdfunding is a way that I think most people know about, and it's still an amazing way. And so what I would say is look at a lot of different ways. Let's say you're starting out really low and you're like, I'm making my first film for like only just, $75,000 or 750,000 kroner or whatever. You want to be under 100,000. And, and I say this number because a lot of filmmakers have made their movies for these types of budgets starting out. Some of the most well-known filmmakers started with their first films being very, very low budgets. So start with the lower budget, as low as you can for your script, and then look for money everywhere. So and you want to look for money everywhere together. So you want to look for some crowdfunding, and then maybe you want to see if there's any grants or other items inside your city or where you live that can give you money. If you're in the EU, of course, there's film funds and things like that. If you're in the US, a lot of those things don't exist, but there's a lot of community funding and things like that could come together depending on what kind of movie you're making. And then also sponsors. And a lot of times people think sponsors is big, but I mean, go to your local car wash and maybe there's some person who owns three car washes. And it's like, we'll say that, this movie was, it's like created by, thanks to, Reid's Car Wash. And if you give us $10,000 for that kind of thing, you can use sponsorship the same way people do it for YouTube. You have them sponsor your film and you can go around and find that way. So there's a lot of different ways you can piece together money. And then the last way would be investors. And if you're looking for investors, I always say start local. Again, I know I came across I looked at the stats one time. It's like, 50 something million millionaires in the world, at least 20 something million in the US. Chances are there's some that live in your own city somewhere. And a lot of time, and if you're like, well, I don't know any millionaires, well, there's a lot of ways you can find them. Like, first, look up the top 1% real estate in your city. Who owns those houses? And a lot of franchises are actually locally owned by someone, a McDonald's franchise or something like that. So there's a lot of different ways you can look around and find someone local, and and reach out to that person, try to find their contact information, and just do a quick call and just say, hey, this is who I am. I am actually looking for investors for a film project. I would love if I could just take 15 minutes of your time one day. Can we grab a cup of coffee? Can I call you back at a better time? I don't want to bother you right now, but there's another time, and they may be intrigued. And the nice thing about looking for local is that chances are they've never thought of film as an investment platform for themselves. And also they're local, so they know you live with, you're in their area, so they have more trust, in you, because they can kind of see where their money is going, things like that. So look for local investors when you finally do it, but that should be the last thing you do. Look everywhere else. So the number one best way to find money for your film is look at your budget and then figure out everywhere where you can save money. Like we talk about sponsors. You could go to, like, let's say you go to some restaurant and say, look, I'm looking for sponsorship money, but also we would love if you could sponsor 2 of our lunches. There you go. Maybe you just saved $200 right there. And if you do that over and over, you can maybe save 10% of your budget. And any savings is a savings, because the goal is to make your movie for as little amount of money as possible. Okay, so that was, I feel like all over the place and a lot of stuff there, but I hope that helped answer that question.
You helped a lot. We are doubling down on all things monetization. So these tactical tips that you just gave is just perfect. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, so if you had one secret to give about filmmaking, to get in as a DIYer again, as someone who's just wanting to sort of enter the industry, what would be one secret, one thing that they might not know?
Connections. The number one thing you can do is connect with people, because it is a collaborative effort. I know I talk about how you can, film a whole film and do everything on your phone. Yeah, that's how you could start, but eventually you're going to want to work with people, and you're going to want to work with people on the creative side and on the business side. So the faster you can grow your network, both with creatives and both with, I call them business and logistical, the faster you'll move forward with your career, because connections is really what get you to the next thing. And again, this doesn't have to be like, well, I have no connections. I mean, I live in some tiny little city in Kentucky, and I have no connections in Hollywood or elsewhere. Or, you live in some tiny little town in Sweden. The connections you start with don't have to be those big connections. They can just be, local, that are going to help you get your movie made. That connection could be an investor that's not looking to invest in your movie, but looking to be a business mentor. And then you also are going to need creative connections and collaborators. So I would say that's kind of like the secret thing. And you don't know who knows someone. I love this story. It's about me, but I just learned like 7 months ago that my stepmother is the aerobics instructor to Greta Gerwig's parents. Greta Gerwig, the director of the Barbie movie, and she is the aerobic instructor to her parents. I had no idea, and not that I'm ever going to try to like use that connection, but my point is, you never know who knows someone else. You never know how close you are to something. So build a network and build connections, because also that helps build a lot of trust, and it helps you build confidence in yourself. So I would say that's kind of like the secret sort of tool is making connections and building those strong connections.
This is so powerful. I often get questions around networking and how to get to know people. Many are either they say that I'm introvert, or I don't know how to network. I don't know how to put myself out there. Do you have any advice for those? How do you start making connections? How do you get?
Yeah, well, actually, I mean, the best introverted tool out there is the social media tool. You can actually, and people don't ever believe me, but I'm an introvert. I don't really like going to events, and I don't like doing too many things. I like one-on-one conversations and things like that. I hate really actually being in big network settings, and it's funny because that's like a huge part of my job, but I don't really like it that much. So you can be an introvert and still do those things. I had to sort of practice. I had to teach myself to to be confident and not be shy and public speaking and those kinds of things. So it's okay to be an introvert, and I wouldn't you let that become an excuse for you not to connect with people. But so to start with, use social media. I mean, you and I don't mean it like I'm just going to start reaching out to people. You can get on. My thought would be, let's say you are a DIY and you don't know anything. I would say get on LinkedIn and get on Instagram. I'd say this is what I would use what I call professional tool and then a sort of creative sharing tool. So it could be the main professional tool is LinkedIn, and then the creative sharing tools like TikTok and YouTube and Instagram and those kind of things. So let's just say you are a DIY filmmaker. You don't know if you want to be a director or a writer or what kind of person. So you're just kind of doing it all on the creative side. Share the things you're doing creatively, and do it consistently. And eventually, you'll just kind of start connecting with other creatives, and those become your collaborative creators. And on the professional side, I would say you can share some of that creative stuff, but share the processes of the creative side. Because then what you're doing is you're sharing like in essence, industry professional knowledge. Even if you think, well, I don't have industry professional knowledge, but if you are trying to film something and then you run into a trouble or some problems, or you're on you're trying to convince a bar owner to let them use your bar, and you learn something from that interaction, well, that now has just become professional knowledge. And you write about that. It's like, I was trying to talk to this bar owner today and see if I could film in their bar, and he said it would cost this much money. But I asked him, oh, can I come in? When it's first opening, when they're cleaning it, like the lights don't need to be off and things like that. I just need like a cool corner to shoot in, and oh yeah, so let me have it for free because of that, and yada yada. So you write about that process of doing that, and then other professionals are going to kind of see the way you're thinking in the business aspect, like, oh, this is someone I'd love to collaborate with because I think they really kind of understand the next steps in their career. Or again, you could just find another collaborator who's like, oh my gosh, I've been looking for someone who is a DIY filmmaker like that, who thinks in those kind of logistical terms and understands the processes. I need someone like that too. Let's collaborate on a professional way. So I think that's the best way to build connections. You don't have to look for anyone big, and also don't just like blast people on Instagram and LinkedIn, because that's not going to work. I mean, if you're looking for a specific, like a mentor, I mean, find 3 people that you think I would love to learn from them, and then reach out to those 3 people with a well drafted message, and not really like don't ask them, will you be my mentor? It's just like, I'm trying to learn a lot, and actually I've been learning a lot from what you've been doing. It could be maybe they're writing on platform or not, or maybe you just saw their work and you love their work. You're like, I really, really love your work. And I saw that, I was reading that, the steps you took when you were 20 years old, and just like, it really inspired me. And, and I would just, if you could just share any kind of knowledge with me, or just, or if I could just ask one question, I would love to just ask one question. And that's the beginning of a dialogue. So if you are looking for like someone bigger in the industry to be a mentor, don't just be like, hey, I have a question for you. Can you help me understand? I need advice. That happens. I get those messages a lot. Hi, I need your advice. So how do I have this script and I need to make it for $150,000. How do I do that? Go to my newsletter, subscribe to my newsletter, read my 300 something LinkedIn posts I've already written so far. But that wouldn't be someone I would never think like, this is a mentee for me. But I have had people reach out and draft really lovely messages to me, and I have continuous dialogue with them to help them on their journeys.
Wow, 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 wow. What a conversation we're having. I know we are sort of getting to the close. I'm going to see if I can just fit in a few more questions before we have to wrap up. Next question is it okay if I do that? I just,
Yeah, yeah, of course. Yeah, yeah,
I
of
know
course.
people will love what we're talking about. The other ones like, yeah, AI and future and cyber threat, is like, now we're getting down to the nitty gritty, and this is exactly what they want. And you give so much information. Question: what is the biggest mistake that filmmakers are doing that you see?
Ooh, that's a hard question, and I think that one comes down to actually. It's like I say that if you want to be a professional filmmaker, you can't. It's like going from a hobby to a to a business. Like I say, like I like to use cooking as an analogy. Like you could bake cookies on the weekend and give them out to people or make a little money, and that's a hobby. But the moment you're like, okay, I'm going to have a little stand, or I'm going to open a little tiny bakery, now it becomes a business, and you got to treat it like a business. And sometimes in between that area, it's like I am a little baker, and now I'm going to start a cookie empire. It's like, and so they want to, it's like, okay, I have made a couple of short films, and now I'm going to make my $1 million feature film. And that's a word, that's a number that gets thrown out a lot for a first feature film. I'm ready to make my $1 million feature film. It's like, well, one, how did you get to that number? Did you even budget it and things like that? And so I think the big mistake people make, and they fail hard, and which is, I mean, and nothing's wrong with failing, but they fail hard, and then they don't want to get back up from it. And that's like, I want to make $1 million movie, and it's like I have $1 million movie, and that's their first feature film, and they spend 3 years trying to get it financed. It never happens. Like, oh my gosh, this is never going to happen, and they give up, or they get into it, and there's a lot of problems, and maybe their investors get very upset and they owe money back. Maybe they even get sued. So, and they're like, I'm never doing this again. So the biggest mistake is going from hiking a trail to climbing a mountain right away. It's like you need to work up to that big stuff. So don't just jump into trying to make a big feature film. I mean, I don't know. This is a great little quote. It says like, you know, don't okay. You want to make a movie for $200 million? Well, how do you make it for 20 million? Okay, so so you make a $20 million. How do you make it for 2 million? Okay, if you want to make a $2 million film, how do you make it for $200,000? And then then get all the way down to $20,000. Can you make a feature film for $20,000? Do that first. Then you do that. Now make a $200,000 feature film. Okay, you can do that. Okay, now make. So that I think is the biggest mistake. Jumping in is something big and bringing on investors right away. I think it's the best thing you can do is make a very small feature film for a very small budget and bring on no investors, unless like the investors like, okay, you know someone and like, okay, I'm going to invest $15,000, and and we're going to have and maybe there's a really just simple investor agreement with it, but don't go and like, I'm going to make $1 million film and I'm going to try to raise $900,000 in investor money. That's a huge mistake, and a lot of filmmakers try to make that gigantic leap.
Oh, wow. What is the biggest opportunity that you see that maybe filmmakers don't see based on where we are right now and what's around the corner? What is like one thing, if you were to say to them, don't miss this, or keep an eye on that, or try this, or do that? What are the opportunities in the industry right now? We talked about AI and people being scared, but it's like, where is the opportunity? What would you recommend filmmakers to do and how to move from where we are to the next step?
I think especially if you're, I like to look at people as starting out. So I look at, I like focus on indie filmmakers that are just kind of just getting started or have just gotten started, instead of ones who, the advice I give isn't really for people who've made 3, 4, 5 films. So my advice here would be that, this is fantastic, but there's been new stats that show that YouTube is being viewed, in the family room, living room screen, almost equal to Netflix. And so it's leaving the phone, it's leaving the tablet or the computer and going on the big screen, which means you have the greatest free distribution platform in the world at your fingertips. And sometimes it's not looking at the new thing out there, but the thing that already exists that you don't think about. And distribution, like a film is nothing without distribution. It's like that. That's saying, if a tree falls in the woods and no one is around to hear it, does it make a sound? If you make a movie and no one watches it, did you make a movie? You know, your goal is to reach an audience. It doesn't matter if it's 10 people, but you just want to start. So you and so I think a lot of filmmakers think like, well, I've got this movie made, but now I've got to find distribution. And of course, you want to do that because it's inside those types of distribution, those funnels. There's also revenue streams, and that's what you're trying to tap into. But right now, but there's so much distribution available to you, and probably also the greatest free marketing arm, which is also YouTube. You know, you've got YouTube for marketing, and then you've got can also have your film on YouTube also. So I think look at the distribution that's already out there because that's, I mean, the making of the movie and distribution are completely equal. You know what's you obviously without the film you have no distribution, and without distribution, what's kind of the point of the film if no one's going to watch it? So I think just use those tools that are available to you and look at YouTube as a premier premium platform for distribution. I know it's easy to be like, oh, but I want to be on Netflix because, of course, you know, there's clout to that name. But I mean, you know, Netflix has, of course, they brag, which is obviously fine. What, you know, a little less than 300 million subscribers, maybe it's 300 million at this point. But I mean, what is that percentage of the world's population? It's minuscule if you think about it. So, but YouTube though has over something billions of users. So you have the greatest distribution platform at your fingertips, and you should definitely use that to your advantage.
It makes sense that you had so many views as well when you did that with your previous work that you mentioned that we talked about. You reached so many tens of millions, if I understand things correctly, on YouTube. Is there any, for people looking into YouTube as a platform, I've heard this from many, that YouTube is not even counted as a social media platform in the sense because it's searchable. It's a different kind of medium in a way. As we're wrapping this up, do you have any final tips for people? Let's say they hear you now and they're like, yeah, totally. Okay, I'm going to DIY this. I'm going to go in. I'm going to make it for the 20, K or, the small budget, and I'm going to use YouTube. I'm going to follow your advice. How do they just set up a profile? Are there any tips or tricks to how they can leverage YouTube as a platform apart from just uploading their film? Given your
yeah, I mean, you have to drive traffic to the channel, and if you just upload a film, that that's going to be a struggle. But you can pulling just different pieces from your film, using different scenes as a way to drive traffic. You can almost split your film apart. You can have your whole film, and then you can also split your film apart into 1 minute reels, vertical films, and people watching and actually watching movies or shows as like a vertical piece all the way through, and watching 65 1 minute clips is becoming very popular. So you could, it may not be it may not be the way you've obviously filmed and created your work, sharing it vertically, but it's a way to drive traffic. Maybe someone watches a scene here and a scene there and there, and like, oh, I'm gonna watch the whole thing, and they go to the channel and they see, oh, there's the whole movie to watch. So you've got to obviously drive traffic to that channel, but only share the things that are relevant to the film. So let's say if you have some behind the scenes, that's fine, or some like interviews with your cast or your crew and things like that. All those things that are relevant to that film. If you want to start talking about other things, and then create a new channel, but use that channel as your film channel, or then eventually, I guess, like you could be like your production company studio channel. But so just putting the film isn't enough. And actually, I would suggest a lot of because of the way that YouTube works, and wants to point you to the next thing to watch, I would suggest putting the film first, and that's the first thing you post, and then post the trailer, and then post the teaser, and then post the marketing stuff, because then after the trailer, it's like, oh, by the way, you can click here to watch it, as opposed to, here's the trailer, and I'm going to drop it on YouTube in 1 month, and they're not going to care because you're not the next superhero movie or the whatever thing. They're probably not going to remember. But if they can watch that trailer now, and then, oh, cool, this looks like a fun movie, and then watch the movie, do that. So almost it's like reverse marketing. Release the product first, and then market it, especially on YouTube.
Wow. Yeah, Wow, what a session we've had. Listen, is there anything that, and thank you so much for being so generous with your expertise. I want to wrap up by asking, is there anything I've forgotten to ask or anything you want to add to what we've just talked about?
Uh, I don't think so. I mean, we covered a lot of territory. I
Yeah.
don't know if there's anything to add. I mean, you could always go into all kinds of directions with all these conversations. But I think the last thing is like, there's no right way. I mean, I share a lot of advice, and there's a ton of advice out there. And some of the things I say will work for you, and some of them won't. Some of them will sound smart, and some of them will sound dumb, because the thing is, there's all kind like there's just so many different ways to be a filmmaker. There's so many different definitions of what it means to be a successful filmmaker. Some people want to be, they want to sort of feel like they're going to be mentioned in amongst the top tier filmmakers, and some people just want to make a few films and make a living, and just enjoy that life. They don't have to be known or recognized. They're very happy with their audience, with their designated sort of true fan audience. So, you know, figure out what matters to you and your career. And of course, obviously over time that may change, but define that for yourself. You don't have to look at other filmmakers and what is talked about in the industry trades in movies, because we only see 1% of what's created and released. It's like 1,000 films released in the United States each year. That's, I mean, how many are seeing? And a lot of those, because there's self-release films on Amazon Direct and things like that. So, but if you're making a movie and you're making some money and you're making a career, that's all that matters. So figure out what matters for you, and then find the advice and the knowledge that works for that, because there's so many directions you can go here, and there's so much different information. So just figure out what's going to serve you best, and serve your career best, and also define what the career that matters to you, and not what other people would think of your career.
That's solid advice. And please, for our audience here, if you're hearing this and you see success based on what you've just been told during this conversation, or if you're already doing things that are working, please share with us. We want to know, because we believe that the more we share with each other, we can pass on what works and what doesn't. And as you said, Tyler, there is no size fits all. And I guess we have to figure things out. Is it someone, I always, at the very end of these talks, I used to ask, is there someone who you feel would be a good guest to bring on to this show, who could follow footsteps, or anyone else that would recommend to come on? It doesn't have to be from the film industry. It could be just anyone working within culture, arts, tech, business, future.
That's a good question. I feel like I come up with quite a few names, but I don't have a name at the top of my head. But I would love to come up with some names for you, and send them off to you. And also, I mean, hopefully, if anybody watching, I think if they feel like they can have something great to share, they shouldn't feel shy to reach out to you and
Yes.
say, "Hey, by the way, I work in this industry, and I've been looking at what people have talked about, and I would love to share my experience or my knowledge in that specific area or field." Because I know that that can be actually feel like a very weird thing to reach out. It's like, I watch your channel. Would you like to interview me?
Yeah.
But I actually think, especially when it comes to these kind of educational talks,
Yeah.
and information sharing talks, that for someone out there, I would say, if you feel like you can provide amazing knowledge and information to someone, don't feel shy, and you should reach out to Arts Dynamics.
Oh, you're so sweet. Yeah, would love to hear from you, of course. I would love to shine a light on you. So where can people find out more about you? We will obviously share the links and social media platforms so people can connect with you. But if they want to find out more, maybe work with you, pitch their 1 million ideas, or whatever it might be, where do they find you?
Well, the number one, I use LinkedIn number one as a platform if you want to just connect that way or follow my content. So you can just find me, Tyler M. Reid. I have a website called tylermreid.com where you can subscribe to my newsletter that goes out weekly, and dives into a lot of depth about quite a bit of the things we have just talked about here. Sort of being an indie filmmaker, finding money, growing an audience, and earning a revenue. And if you're interested in virtual production, just to learn or to dive in more, if you need support in virtual production, you can go to vp-nordic.se or .se.
Brilliant. We'll make sure to include those in the show notes as well, both to your newsletter and to the production company and to all of the things that you've just mentioned. Well, thank you so much for a fantastic conversation. I feel so fired up. I look forward to hearing from everybody. I want to know what your thoughts are. I'm sure you have more questions, and then just reach out directly to Tyler. So with that, we are about to wrap up here. Thank you so much for tuning in. We are back for the season 2024-25. Some news from Arts Dynamics quickly is that we've got in-person meetups in Stockholm. We've been to Gothenburg. We've been to Athens in Greece. We've got more meetups coming up in Berlin, in London. We're talking about Tokyo. We're talking about San Francisco. So if you are out there listening to this and you're like, I would like to have a creative entrepreneur meetup in my city, let us know, because we are now bringing creators together, and we're also launching a membership where we can connect virtually. So you can also connect with people like Tyler and other experts. Because there are so many who are out there and who really knows what they're doing. And we believe in the power of community. And just like we said, both have coaches and mentors and experts, but also peer-to-peer learning and support. So we'll post more about that shortly. But for now, thank you all so much. More information on artsdynamics.com. We look forward to hearing from you, and welcome back again next week for another episode and another guest. Over and out.